I gave my boss the presentation of her career. I had spent 4 months building it. I researched it, wrote every slide, and rehearsed every answer to every possible question. It was the most complete piece of work I had ever produced. It was going to change the direction of our entire department. I sent it to her on a Sunday night to review before Monday's board meeting. She presented it Monday morning without me in the room. She didn't mention my name once. I know because I watched it happen via livestream in a conference room down the hall with 3 of my colleagues, none of whom could quite look at me afterward. That was 2 years ago. Last month, in front of the same board, I showed them 4 years of metadata. Sandra resigned 4 days later. This is how I got there, and why it took me 4 years to understand what was actually happening. My name is Nina. I'm 31 years old. I'm a strategy analyst at a mid-sized consulting firm, or I was until 6 weeks ago when I was promoted to Director of Strategy, which is the end of this story. My boss's name was Sandra. 53, 20 years at the company. The kind of executive who had survived 4 restructurings by being indispensable to those above her. She was articulate, well-dressed, and genuinely impressive in rooms where decisions were being made. She had a way of speaking about complex problems that made the room feel like she had understood something they hadn't quite grasped yet. What I didn't understand for 3 years was that the thing Sandra was understanding, the framework, the analysis, the specific insight that made the room lean forward, was usually mine. She was receiving my work privately and presenting it publicly in a way that preserved enough ambiguity that no one had any reason to ask where the ideas had originated. She never lied. That was the thing. She said things like, "What we've been developing and the direction I've been pushing the team toward." Always we. Always the team. Always with enough passive construction that my name could be absorbed into a collective without anyone noticing the absence. It was, I came to understand, a very old trick. Old enough that there is probably a name for it in organizational psychology textbooks, and I had been its subject for 3 years without quite seeing it clearly. I want to go back to the beginning. 3 years ago, 4 months into my job. My first major independent project was a market segmentation analysis for a client pitch. I spent 6 weeks on it, after hours, weekends, the kind of focused work you do early in a career when you are trying to prove something. I sent it to Sandra for review the Thursday before the client meeting. She responded with 3 sentences. "This is excellent. I have a few small additions I'll incorporate. I'll handle the presentation." I thought, handle the presentation meant managing the logistics, presenting the work I had done, and crediting me appropriately, introducing the framework I'd built. On the day of the client meeting, I sat in the 3rd row of a conference room while Sandra walked through 42 slides I had built. She used the phrase, "my analysis," 4 times. She used the phrase, "my framework," twice. She thanked the team generally at the end in a sentence so brief it was barely audible. We won the client. Afterward, in the hallway, my colleague Marcus said, "Great work," I said. She didn't mention my name. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "She never does." That was 3 years ago. That was the moment I should have understood. I didn't, not fully. I told myself it was how things worked. I told myself visibility came with time. I was wrong about both. On Monday morning, while Sandra was presenting 4 months of my work to the board, I was sitting in a conference room with Marcus and 2 other colleagues watching a live stream. Marcus watched Sandra go through slide after slide, slides he had watched me build in this building over 4 months. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Nina, does she have your files?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Does she have the metadata?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Then you have everything you need." I didn't understand what he meant yet. Within 48 hours, I would. What Marcus showed me over coffee that Monday afternoon was that every file in our company's cloud system carried embedded metadata: creation date, author name, modification history, and version log. Every single edit I had made to the board presentation was time-stamped with my login credentials. The file had been created by me. It had been modified by me 412 times. Sandra had opened it twice, once on Saturday afternoon, once on Sunday night after I sent it. She had contributed 0 edits. Then Marcus pulled up the market segmentation analysis. My creation. 6 weeks of work. Sandra had opened it once, the day before the client meeting. Then the operational framework I'd built the following year. Same pattern. Then the competitive intelligence system from the year after that. Same pattern. 4 years of the same pattern, documented automatically, sitting on the company's own servers. I had been systematically credited with nothing. The record of who had actually done the work had existed the entire time, in a format Sandra apparently hadn't considered. I spent the next 3 months not confronting Sandra, not going to HR, and not telling anyone except Marcus. What I did was volunteer to present at the next quarterly all-hands leadership meeting, attended by the full board, the executive team, and 80 senior staff. I told Sandra I wanted more visibility. She agreed immediately, which told me everything I needed to know about how confident she was. I spent 3 months preparing a presentation on the future of the strategy function. Embedded invisibly in the file properties was a complete metadata audit of every major project I had produced in 4 years. I did not tell Sandra what was in it. I sent it to her the Sunday before the meeting. There was a second time I almost said something, 18 months ago. A company-wide presentation to new partners where Sandra described the operational framework I'd built as a methodology I've been developing over the past 2 years. I was in the room. Several of the new partners looked at me when she said it, not because they knew, but because I was the person listed in the materials as the analyst who had worked on it. After the meeting, one of the new partners came up to me. He said, "Sandra mentioned you've been integral to this work. Can you walk me through the methodology?" I walked him through it. Every piece of it. He asked good questions. I had good answers because I had built every layer of what he was asking about. Afterward, he said, "You should be presenting this yourself." I said, "I'm working toward that." He said, "Don't work toward it. Do it." He didn't know he had just given me the clearest possible instruction. I thought about that conversation a lot over the following 18 months while I was deciding what to do and how to do it. I decided he was right. Sandra opened the file at 9:47 p.m. on Sunday. She made one edit. She changed the title slide to add her name as a co-presenter. I watched the modification notification arrive on my phone. I took a screenshot. I added the screenshot to the presentation as a final slide. Then I went to sleep. The meeting was on a Tuesday. 83 people in the room. The full board on a video call. Sandra sat in the front row. She had her notebook open. She had added her name to my title slide, and I had quietly removed it before the final version was printed, the version distributed to the room and shared with the board, which no one had sent her. I presented for 42 minutes. For the first 38, it was a strategy presentation. Clean, well-sourced, precisely delivered. Sandra was nodding. I could see her in my peripheral vision, nodding at work she was probably preparing to discuss in the hallway afterward as what we've been developing. At minute 38, I said, "Before I close, I want to address something about how strategy work gets produced in this company. I think it's directly relevant to where we're going." I clicked to the metadata table, 4 rows, each row a major project, 3 columns, project name, file creation record with my authorship and timestamp, and Sandra's access log showing a single open event the day before each of her presentations. I did not say Sandra's name. I did not have to. Every person in that room had attended at least 2 of those presentations. Every person in that room could read a table. The last slide was the screenshot. The title slide she had edited at 9:47 p.m. on Sunday. Her name added to work she had not touched. I said, I want to be clear going forward about who produces the work that this company makes decisions on. Then I asked if there were questions. There were no questions. Sandra did not look at me for the remainder of the meeting. She left before it ended. I watched her go. The week before the meeting, Marcus asked me if I was sure. We were having coffee. He had helped me build the metadata audit. He knew exactly what the table contained and what it would do to Sandra's career. He wasn't trying to talk me out of it. He had been the one, 2 years earlier, who had shown me the metadata existed. But he asked me if I was sure. I told him I had thought about it for 2 years. He asked me what I would do if the company sided with Sandra, if the institutional weight of 20 years landed on her side and against mine. I told him I had a complete documentation file, a lawyer I had already consulted, and a copy of every relevant file stored off the company's server. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You've been planning this." I said, "For 18 months. He laughed. It was a short, genuine laugh, the kind that comes out when something is exactly what you expected and still surprises you. He said, "She picked the wrong analyst." I told him she had no idea what analysts actually do. He said that was exactly the problem. Sandra resigned 4 days after the meeting. I was told it was mutual. The day after she resigned, I received an email from her personal address. 3 sentences. She said she hoped I was satisfied. She said she had always believed in my potential and had been trying to give me opportunities. She said she thought I had handled this in a way that was unnecessarily public and that I would come to regret it. I read the email twice. Then I forwarded it to HR and deleted it from my inbox. I have not regretted a single thing. I have been director of strategy for 6 weeks. The work is harder than being an analyst. The stakes are higher. There is no one above me absorbing credit for what I produce. That last part is the one I think about most. Marcus got a promotion 2 months after the meeting. I recommended him. I still haven't asked him whether he knew, that Monday morning when he asked about the metadata, exactly what it would eventually be used for. I suspect he did. The answer doesn't change anything. I think about the people who never find a Marcus, who don't have a colleague willing to say, does she have the metadata at exactly the right moment? I think about the analysts who built frameworks that became someone else's methodology without a modification log anywhere in the world that could prove otherwise. The metadata was always there. It exists in every cloud-based system. It has always existed. Sandra operated for 4 years on the assumption that work product could be separated from its author without leaving a trace. She was wrong, but she had every reason to believe she was right, because it had worked 4 times before I found out. If you have a boss who takes credit for your work, your files have metadata, your emails have timestamps, your calendar invites show who attended which meetings, the record exists. It is sitting on a server somewhere, waiting for the right question to be asked. I just had to wait for the right room. And when the room was right, I showed up with 412 edits and a screenshot taken at 9:47 p.m. on a Sunday.